Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another week of Behind the Mic. I'm Jonathan Hodgson with you once again for another Friday evening, and we have a little bit of a different show for you this evening. We're used to having a lot of fun with a number of great sportscasters from around North America, but this week we changed the pace a little bit for a very worthwhile cause with the 3-year mark of the Humboldt Broncos bus accident on April 6, 2018, approaching in a few days. We wanted to take this opportunity to speak to a couple of voices who are relevant in the Saskatchewan and in the Canadian sports scene, and pay our respects and our tributes to that team and get a perspective from somebody who has gone into the Humboldt Broncos in the years since and has seen the team and the town carry on, and that is, of course, Rory McGoran, the play-by-play announcer now for the Broncos. So coming up, we have in our next block, Rod Pedersen is back on Behind the Mic for the second time. He's, of course, been a fixture in the Saskatchewan sports scene for more than 20 years in the Western Hockey League, the Canadian Football League, and, of course, now host of the Rod Pedersen Show. We look forward to visiting with him. And in block number 2, we have Dave Dawson, who is an experienced junior hockey broadcaster and has done work in other sports as well, including baseball, and that's where him and I crossed paths originally. And he has a unique angle to bring as well in his media role. He crossed paths with Darcy Haugan, the head coach of the Broncos, who passed away in the accident, and he's had the chance to interview Darcy as well as his wife, Christina. So he'll bring that perspective on Darcy Haugan. So we're going to move right into it and take one more break and then come right back with Rod. Before we do, we'll remind you that you can find all of our shows Behind the Mic and all of our ASTV shows at astvproductions.com, as well as Facebook, and you can follow us on Twitter. So once again, thanks for spending your Friday night with us here on Behind the Mic, and we'll be back after this break in 30 seconds with Rod Pedersen. And once again, welcome back to Behind the Mic, here now with Rod Pedersen to talk with us here in this first block. Rod, welcome back to Behind the Mic.
Hey, Jonathan, good to see you. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. And when this idea came about, I was only going to do it if I had the right people, the right voices, and the right perspectives to share. And you're number one on that list. So we I can't say it enough how appreciative I am that you would come on the show and lend your perspectives and do this with us.
My pleasure.
I guess we'll jump into it. I just kind of want to set the scene a little bit. Of course, if you're watching this show, you know the basics of what we're talking about. 3 years ago, the Humboldt Broncos, Saskatchewan Junior League team, involved in a crash and that took the lives of 16 people. Rod, I just wanted to, with you in this first block, I wanted to get your perspectives as somebody on the media side, but who has also worked with several different teams. Your perspectives on the how that time played out, and also what the feeling is every year when April 6th rolls around. So we'll start just kind of generally. Where do your thoughts go every April 6th when the annual mark rolls around?
Well, I'll go back to leading up to the crash, Jonathan, if you don't mind. About a year before that, I'd been hired by the SJHL to write the 50-year history book for the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. So I'd already had an association with the Broncos a little bit that way. But the night of the crash, they were on their way to Nipawin, as most people know, for Game 5 of a playoff series. And I was on the radio doing my talk show. And I think it was 6:17 p.m. I got a text message that there'd been an accident. And I honestly thought, oh, maybe they got stuck. Maybe they just slid off the road. Nothing too serious. And fortunately, I went off the air 13 minutes after that, the end of my show, because I don't think I could have handled much more live reporting, because it kept coming in with text messages from people involved with the Broncos that guys are dead, and this is the most horrible thing, which it would end up being. And I remember talking with my dad that night, who scouted, for 30 years, NHL, Western League, and the death count kept climbing. It was 3 people, then it was 6 people, then it was 11 people, just like that night. And my dad, just being a hockey guy, was beside himself. And I started thinking, who do I know on that bus? And I started sending some messages, and one was Chris Beaudry, who's the assistant coach. And it was the next morning he got back to me. He wasn't on the bus. I'm sure you know all these stories, but he was driving on his own. He wasn't on the bus. And he just responded that he was fine, gave me a bit of an update of where things were at, and then take it from there. Sunday night was the vigil in the Rod Pedersen Arena. The Prime Minister flew in for it, packed arena for that. And then from that moment forward, it's been the recovery process. So as you say, coming up on 3 years of April 6th, I've been dealing with a lot of the families, chatting with some of the survivors, not just Chris Beaudry. I talked to him this week, but Caleb Dahlgren, his book just came out, Crossroads. I've talked to Caleb about that. You can't tell people how to grieve, and you certainly can't tell people how to recover. So I would suggest, with the bus driver, Glenn Dirksen, I've been dealing with his son, like we're kind of all over it. And I've been in Humboldt, as you mentioned, several times since. I guess the best way to say it is everybody is grieving in their own way. Everybody's recovering in their own way, and everybody will recognize April 6th in their own way. And I think I kind of foolishly or naively, in the work that I do with them, said it's just another day. Don't let it get you too down. But I've got anniversaries of things in my life of tragedies, right? You can't schedule feelings, right? How they feel is how they feel. So how April 6th comes up, I guess, and it affects hundreds of people, thousands really, for those that just feel empathy and sympathy for the survivors or the victims' families or the Broncos franchise. For me, I try to look at it as just another day on the calendar, just to be strong and not break down. but it's hard to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things we saw in that, especially that initial time period of the weeks and even months after it took place, was just the deep resonance that it had, not only in Saskatchewan but Canada and beyond hockey, sport wide, worldwide. People were taking notice, and I think some of it had to do with, it was a junior hockey team riding a bus and how common that was. Was that part of why you think it resonated so deeply with so many people?
That's what I heard from people, was that it wasn't just, I mean, a lot of hockey guys had written me and said, hey, that could have been us. That I think that really shook people. But it was actually, Jonathan, not just hockey. It was all sports. It was cheer teams, dance teams, any tourist groups, anybody that's ever gotten on a bus runs that risk of something like that happening. I think that's why it resonated so much, and why, I've never, with the $15 million that was raised on the GoFundMe, I don't know if that's an all-time record for GoFundMe. It's the highest that I'd ever heard, and so it showed the outpouring, and those donations were coming from all around the world. But it was a really raw time, because the SJHL itself had never dealt with publicity of that kind. CBC, CNN, BBC, they're all coming in and broadcasting live. Well, the SJHL never experienced that kind of, again, publicity before, and it wasn't positive, right? So they didn't know how to deal with reporters that were disguising themselves and sneaking into the church on that Sunday morning for the service, with a small camera, right? Because they were there for themselves. They weren't there for the people of Humboldt, right? They were there to report on it. And then I just saw a commercial tonight here for Caleb's book. If you've seen it on TSN, I'm not sure if you've seen the commercial, but it's got with the sticks out in front of the houses. Well, that is like a kick to the gut too, because I just remember that was happening around the world, and it was everybody showing their support, no doubt. It was, and that was heartwarming. But I remember when the team played its first game the following September, because we didn't know if the franchise would even continue after that. I wasn't real keen on TSN coming in to do the game, which they did with Cuthbert and Ray Ferraro and the whole gang, because all the people I talked to in Humboldt from the time of the crash until the following September, they were starting to say enough with the circus. Like you've shown your support and everything, but when that game happened and I watched the telecast, I wasn't there. It was a chance for Humboldt to say thank you to the entire world. So while some people would have liked their privacy respected, I think the majority of people saw that as an opportunity to say thanks. But when they did that memoriam after the game, where they unveiled all the banners of all 29 people on the bus, that was tough to watch. That was really tough to. I'm like, I can barely handle watching this, but I can't turn it off. You know what I mean? That's so. All those feelings are going to come to the fore this week again, I think. I still think about the Humboldt Broncos every day. I get annoyed when people say, has it been 1 year already? Has it been 2 years already? Well, yeah, because you've moved on with your life. And that's just human nature for people to say that. But I just get a little annoyed because there's still people that are deeply, deeply hurting for this. And some that will be hurting for the rest of their lives. You don't get over losing a son, a daughter, a dad, right, in all these instances. But that's where I just feel you know what it's like, Jonathan. I get a little too defensive and realize they don't mean anything by that, right? That's just people venting, I guess, or just talking.
And so for when that date rolls around again here in a few days, and you kind of alluded to the different levels of it. If you know somebody who was directly affected, indirectly affected, or if it's just somebody that has a great sense of empathy, when that date rolls around and that person crosses your mind, how do you reach out, or do you reach out? What's the how can we as a public be there for people who are still affected by this?
I think that you do it however you want. If you know somebody personally that was affected, send them a message. They may or may not respond. If you don't know what to do, don't do anything. If you want to take to your social media and say, hey, today I remember the Humboldt Broncos, do it that way. Do it your way. I mean, however you feel comfortable doing it. I know that because everybody's going to handle it differently, Jonathan. Not everybody's going to handle it the same. For instance, I know one person that was affected by the crash was like a year and a half afterwards, walked into the bank in Humboldt, and the teller broke down crying as soon as they saw that person. And that person said, I'm trying to get on with my life. If somebody looks at me and starts crying, like, how am I supposed to move on? So that's all that I'm saying there. This is going to bring up memories that people are trying to deal with, in some cases suppress. But to tell somebody that you're thinking of them and care, there's nothing wrong with that. You never know how that's going to be received. So do what you think's appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I've been debating whether or not to bring up, but I think it's irrelevant, is the fact that this was the second time that the province of Saskatchewan had seen something like this, sadly, with the 1986 Swift Current Broncos. And so did that add another layer of things with sadly familiar scene playing out in that province?
All it did was, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for the million other people here, but it just made me think, why us? Why is it always us? And to have a team that was also named the Broncos, that's all that it is. I wrote a column on the Monday, 3 days after the crash, that I said that. I said, why is it always us? But I said, we will pull together. We'll get through this together. And I had family members of victims write me and say, you don't speak for us. You don't speak for this province. And I said, I'm speaking for me, but so it's a highly, highly delicate situation. And, I know guys that were on that Tisdale, when I say on that Tisdale bus, sorry, Tim Tisdale was on that bus with the Swift Current Broncos. So he's a friend of mine, and we've talked about it at length. I go back to everybody heals in their own way, everybody grieves in their own way, and there's really no influence that we can have on that. So my only answer to the Swift Current thing as it relates to Humboldt is why us? And as a guy that worked 17 years in the Western Hockey League, and you worked many years traveling the buses, you don't think about it, I don't think, when you climb aboard a bus, that maybe this will be your last road trip. You don't think about it. Maybe you don't allow yourself to think about that. But I guarantee you on April 6th, everybody's going to be thinking about it that feels some sort of connection. Absolutely.
And the one thing that I remember seeing living out in Victoria already was that broke, the news of that broke during a WHL game out here, and that game was a very eerie feeling. But in the ensuing few days, seems like every WHL game would start with the two teams intertwined around the center ice circle, and it was a very, very close, very raw couple of weeks around the hockey community. And that's something that I've grown to appreciate the last few years, is just how close, how tight-knit the hockey community can be. And it's more difficult to do that this year with games having a hard time getting on the ice. But as we were talking about before, hopefully via phone call or text, it can still be that way this year.
Well, when you say that, I would suspect, even with these WHL games that are going on here in the hub, and maybe if there's games scheduled that day for Cologne and Kamloops, I would assume there'll be a moment of silence. They'll be honored in some way. But one thing, there is not really a silver lining, but what made me really proud, Jonathan, through that whole week after the crash, was the leadership shown by the SJHL president, Bill Chow, by the president of the Humboldt Broncos, Kevin Geringer, by Officer Zablocki with the RCMP. who were standing at a podium daily talking to the world and kept their composure and showed tremendous leadership in the worst time. I mean, to this day, it's the worst day in Saskatchewan history. I've called it that. Nobody's argued it. April 6, 2018 will be the worst day in Saskatchewan history. And like I say, those guys made us real proud to be that we're from Saskatchewan, and they represented us real well that day and in the days after the crash.
Absolutely. We're going to take our first break here. And on the other side, we're going to bring in another voice into the conversation, and somebody that I'm looking forward to add into this. Dave Dawson is a veteran junior hockey broadcaster from Alberta, and he crossed paths a few times with Darcy Haugan, who was the head coach of that Broncos team and passed away. And he had some experience with Darcy that kind of shed some light on the stories we've heard about Darcy and the way he ran his teams. So we'll come back on the other side of this break and add in Dave Dawson to the conversation here on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions.
Why go solar? Solar is better than ever. Our revolutionary design and inverter equipment with the latest in solar panel technology for the ultimate in-home and business security. That's right, I said security. Grid security and security of your home are linked. Fortify your future today with a battery backup system. No maintenance, quiet running. Did you know in Manitoba, grid-connected, off-grid, and battery backup systems are 100% right off in the year you purchase for any company or farm? Do you want to back up your internet, keep your tills running, and the lights on? We can install a system that is right for you with battery backup fully capable of taking on all those essential loads and keeping you running. When you call our experts at Evolve Green, ask about getting your free energy audit today. Call or email today to find out what system works best for you. 1-866-5EVOLVE or support@evolvegreen.ca. Also, be sure to check out our website at www.evolvegreen.ca.
Welcome back to Behind the Mic. Jonathan Hodgson in conversation in our first segment with Rod Pedersen, and that gives us a chance now in our second segment to add in Dave Dawson to the conversation. Dave, your first visit to Behind the Mic. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Haji. And I feel honored to be on the show with my buddy Roddy and my buddy Haji, the two guys together. It's been a long time since I've chatted with both.
Good to see you, Dave.
Always a pleasure, Roddy, man. It's great.
Been trying to get you on the show for a while, and obviously it goes without saying that wish that it was a little happier conversation, but we'll have you back again to dive into your story. But like I said to Roddy off the top of the show was, and I've shared this with you off air, was the fact that I didn't need to do this show. I didn't need to add another voice to the masses because everybody has talked about this, and kind of like Rod was saying in the first in the first segment, was kind of that fatigue of everybody's got something to say. But this, as kind of a hockey person now, it was on my heart for a while, but I was only going to do it if I had the appropriate voices that could bring something. And you are exactly that. My thoughts went straight to you because I know that you had some opportunities to cross paths with Darcy Haugan, the head coach of that 2017-2018 Humboldt Broncos. You had the chance to interact with him at the rink in his previous job and interview him. So I guess we'll start off by just letting you kind of set the scene, kind of with your experience that led you to cross paths with Darcy.
Yeah, I think having Roddy on the show is probably a good intersecting point, because it's actually how Darren DuPont and I met and became friends years ago. We were both broadcasting hockey games in the Northwest Junior Hockey League and Junior B in Northern Alberta. Darren was the play-by-play guy for the Dawson Creek Junior Canucks, and I was for the Whitecourt Wolverines at that time. And so they were in that league, an 8-team league. Peace River was one of the top teams, and so I've had a number of opportunities to interact with Darcy Haugan, and he was well known as a man of integrity. And his teams were compiled, and you talked to a number of coaches across the league during that time, and they'd always say, Darcy Haugan teams come to work. The coaches would say, they don't party, they eat, they work, they play hockey. They eat, they work, and they play hockey. Those are Darcy Haugan coach teams, and it was embodied in the rink, this element of respect and integrity, and the way that the teams, there wasn't that superstar player, I think, on a lot of teams. And at the Junior B level, you guys all know this, that it's the parity in skill sometimes can be, you have 1 or 2 or 3 guys that have their head above the rest, and then the rest of them kind of maybe toe in the back. But for Darcy Haugan teams, it was really a unified, we are all this group together, let's accomplish this goal together. So in my interactions with him, like I said, a man of integrity. And Whitecourt and Peace River had kind of developed a rivalry, as they were an expansion team into that league in 2007, and I took over the following year. So the 3 years that I broadcasted in Whitecourt for, there was an intense rivalry between the two cities. And every time you'd go up to Peace River, you'd feel that energy in the rink, and just interacting with Darcy, doing interviews with him, well respected, just a gentle, humble. He'll give you an honest, great clip all of the time. And I had always looked forward to trips to when Peace River came to town, and when we were able to go to Peace River, just be able to interact with somebody with just that gentle personality.
And we hear so much in the media about how, just like you said, that he wanted his players to not just be good teams and play well, but he wanted to help them become good citizens, and he wanted them to be good citizens while they were there. Do you think you got a good glimpse into kind of why that was, and why it was that way?
Everybody asks me what's one story that sticks out in my memory with Darcy when it comes to character. And the one thing that always comes to mind was, it was my final year broadcasting there. It was 2011. It was the championship, and Peace River had a 3-1 lead in the series. Whitecourt is going up, and towards the end there to try and win in Game 7. And I had talked to Darcy before, and we had got word that the Peace River broadcast team wasn't going to be doing the game. They were just going to let us take the reins. So I thought, okay, this is an opportunity to broadcast to both audiences. So I called Darcy earlier in the day, and I said, hey, regardless of the outcome, can I get a clip of you after the game, win or lose? He said, yeah, you have my word. I'll give you a great interview. I said, fantastic. So Whitecourt is behind in that game. They came back and ended up winning the championship, and the celebrations on the ice were long, and player interviews, et cetera, et cetera. And as I was doing the interviews, I'm kind of formulating a plan to divert and build it to chatting with Darcy. And I glanced across the rink at about my second interview. I think I did 4 or 5. And there's Darcy standing against the glass watching. And you often see this. This isn't rare. You see this quite often. An athlete will stand on the field and watch the celebrations to get that glimpse of what that is like as motivation for the next year. And I liked to think that it was a bit of that, but it was just an element of Darcy going, I said I'd give you this clip, and regardless of how long you're going to take, I will wait here for you to show you that I respect you. So after must have been 20, 25 minutes of post-game interviews, I went and inside the glass there and or off the rink, and chatted with Darcy, who gave me probably one of the best interviews I've ever done in my life, still to this day. That was 10 years ago, and just humble, genuine, gentle, and it blew my mind. And it's one thing that I think, as I got to know the Haugan family over the years, realizing that that element of faith was really prevalent in their life.
Yeah, and that's something that you've been able to learn more about with his wife Christina. I know the two of you have connected on one story in particular for one of your writing jobs that you have with Sports Spectrum. What can you let us in on kind of what you've learned about how Christina has walked through this and kind of that story?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It was, to be honest, I'll kind of much like Roddy set the stage at the beginning that when I heard what had happened, obviously devastated. Darcy was the first person that came to my mind. And Aaron Rawlick at that time was the president of Alberta Junior B and has been a good friend of mine for a number of years. So I called him that evening and we just kind of talked about it. And Mike Fosty, who was the assistant coach of Peace River, really good friends with him. So he chatted with him that night. And with that in the back of my mind, as time went on throughout the year, I remember there being a media clip. And Roddy, I just want to say I loved what you said about people grieve differently. I think that you're right. Some people, if they want to cry, if they want to suppress whatever works best for them, there's no one way to grieve. And I really appreciate you saying that, because I remember seeing the media, Christina, as the trial was going on, she came out and said something so profound during the trial and said, I forgive the semi-driver. And I thought that was, faith or not, that is a difficult pill to swallow if you're a person of faith or not. I've been a person of faith most of my life. And there are times that I'm like, I don't know how I can forgive that person for what they did, right? And maybe those without faith in the same boat. Like maybe there are people who can forgive and not. It's not an exclusive thing to faith-based people. But that blew my mind when she said that. And I thought, wow, I really need to connect with her. I'm not sure if she would remember me because the interactions, she was, kind of running around the rink at that time. And I'm the broadcast guy, walk in, walk out, whatever. Hi, she knew who I was. So I had reached out to Aaron Rawlick and I said, hey, this clip from Christina broke me. I have this platform with Sports Spectrum that does international faith-based stories. I would love the opportunity to chat with her and tell the world about this crazy idea of forgiveness and what this can do to somebody, what it had done for her. So I reached out to Aaron. I said, hey, I'm looking to get a hold of Christina. Is there a way that you can help me? And he said, all right, well, I'll talk to Mike Fosty, the assistant coach, now head coach and general manager in Peace River. And he said, let's see what I can do. So Fosty and I chatted on the phone for about 10 minutes and kind of tossed the idea back and forth. And he said, okay, well, I'll see what I can do. A day later, sends me her number. And as I got the number, I just thought to myself, okay, well, and this is how I make my decisions. I just prayed and said, God, if this is your will to put this story together, this is what I want to offer this gift to people. So please, can you make this work? So I just fired a text and said, hey, Christina, if you remember me, I'm Dave Dawson. I did play-by-play in Whitecourt a number of years ago. I'm working for faith-based media now. That's kind of where my career has taken me. And I'd love to tell your story of forgiveness. And a few moments later, we just kind of got back and forth. And she said, and it was about this time. I think it was about March 27th or 28th when I first reached out to her. And right at towards the 1-year anniversary. And she had said, I'm not really talking to media right now. She had and I had been made mind of that. Aaron had told me that she's kind of not talking to anybody. So, but after a couple hours of chatting, she gave me the opportunity to do this interview. So during the interview, I got to experience the most just powerful story as she walked me through the process of what that day looked like. I got to really see, what forgiveness. I mean, it's such a powerful mindset of how she was able to experience that.
That's a great story, for sure. And Roddy, if you have anything else for Dave, feel free to add into the conversation. But otherwise, I think we're going to toss it to a break here. But Dave, thanks so much for coming on here for a few minutes and sharing a little bit of your experience with Darcy and with Christina and helping us learn a little bit about what they were about. So thanks so much for this, Dave.
Before we go, Haji, if I can just, is that okay if I just add this one thing that I think that I meant, Roddy, I just want to address you in this too. I loved what you said about how some of the players go into a bank and people see them and start crying, and in my chats with Christina over the last year, one of the things that she had brought up is that the hardest part for her is sometimes that people forget about her, right? It's that, oh, okay, those texts now don't come anymore. And sometimes they were coming too much, right? So I think that is helpful to be mindful of those players and the families that, there is no one template for everyone. And I think when you said that, Rod, that really hit home, and it made me realize that grieving is at different stages.
Yeah, and the reason I didn't have anything to add I was just spellbound listening to what you had to say, by the way. And I hope that people are getting something out of this that are watching the interview, because there's no silver lining for Christina with what she's been through here and her boys. However, if she knew that she could help somebody in their lives with what she's been through, that would make her feel a lot better, right? The concept of forgiveness, because it's a tough one, and you do it more for you than you do it for the person you're forgiving, as you guys know. But it works, and it's a rare mindset, as you say. So that's a little bit of paying it forward for those folks. And I didn't know those stories about Darcy either. So thanks for sharing, Dave.
All right. Thanks so much. Yeah, definitely agree on that as well. So thanks, Dave. We'll toss it to a break here.
Thanks,
Roddy, if I could have you hang around for a few more minutes, we have a couple of clips from Rory McGoran. We'll run those, and then we'll wrap it up on the other side, behind the mic here on ASTV Productions. And back here on Behind the Mic for one more segment with Rod Pedersen, and we're going to do something a little bit different here for the first time. Earlier today, I had the chance to catch up with Rory McGoran, who is the current play-by-play voice for the Humboldt Broncos. He arrived with the Broncos in 2018-2019, the season following the accident, and so he has been a part of that program for the last 3 seasons, including the really emotional first season in 2018 and 2019. So I just wanted to talk to him to get his perspectives on being a part of that program since, and being in that community. Obviously not as much with the halted season this year. But he had some really good things to say on a few different topics. So we've cut some clips, a few different clips on a few different topics. So we're going to run those now. And Roddy, if anything strikes you and you want to jump in after each clip, you can. Otherwise, we'll cycle through them and then get your thoughts on the other side. So first one from Rory talking about heading into the Broncos.
For me, and yeah, of course, it's never easy to talk about these things, but we want to pay as much respect, all the time to the players that were there before us and the ones that kind of set the steps for us to follow. And there were so many players on that team that did that. So when I got here, my main goal was I wanted to pay respect as much as I could to everyone who came before me, but I also knew that there was a team that's stepping on the ice that was wearing their hearts on their sleeves and deserved a spotlight as well because it was not easy task, especially the returning veterans, to what they were doing on the team. And I know I wanted to give them the proper acknowledgement and the proper spotlight as well, and use both to bring hockey back on the radio. But not only that, if some people couldn't listen to it, I understood. But if it was a healing process for some to have hockey back in their lives, and more specifically the Humboldt Broncos, I was just honored to be the one to be able to help do that.
And then after that, I went on to ask him about how that first season, that 2018-19 season, wore on from such an emotional start, as we referred to earlier in the show with the TV game. I asked him how that first season wore on and started to gain a sense of normalcy.
I think it did eventually as the season grew on, and I just got to give all the, props towards that to the players that were on the ice, because, it was really tough to gauge how competitive they would be. But each time they stepped on the ice, they just proved that, they loved the game so much, and it was hockey again for a lot of them. And not only that, but they were competitive, and then entered the playoffs and had that 7-game series with the Bruins. Like, it was just, I really hope you could feel it in the arena, the energy in every game. And I just hope that it did bring some joy to see how well those men competed.
And one more on that season was about the return of the 3 veterans from the 17-18 team that returned during the following season in Braden Camrood, Derek Patter, and Tyler Smith.
For everything, man. They didn't have to do that. That was a tough situation. The spotlight was as bright as it was on those 3. That's a lot to deal with as a, 19, 20-year-old kid. And I think they did that in spades. Like, I look up to those 3, and I'm 10 years older than them. So, and I'm sure a lot of people that are even older than me do the same. They were outstanding for how they conducted themselves on the ice and off the ice. And I don't have anything but great things to say about those 3.
Rod, does anything catch your ear when you listen to Rory talk about that 18-19 season, and particularly those 3 veterans?
Well, yeah. I back to how everybody deals with things their own way. Ryan Strasniski, who was paralyzed from the waist down, living north of Calgary there. I remember him being asked about coming back for the first game or some sort of event in Humboldt, and Ryan saying, "How can you fault him for this?" He said, "That's not my team. Those aren't my guys." And he's not talking about those 3 returning vets, but how it wasn't his team. And so what Rory said there, I never even thought about the fact that those 3 vets might consider not returning. So kudos to them for doing it. And I watched them play, and Camrood was an all-star. Played a showcase. I remember talking with him there. That return season was very emotional for mostly the community of Humboldt, obviously, but for the entire province. And they did have a great showing going to a 7-game series against the Estevan Bruins. I was at those games, and it was absolutely wild. So just listening to Rory, the strength in the franchise coming back, and the strength in the community rallying with each other and coming back as a community, that's what echoes with me out of that, Jonathan.
And I went on to ask him about an interview he conducted a couple of years prior to his arrival in Humboldt with Adam Harold, who was on that 2017-18 Broncos team and passed away in the crash. And he was a former Regina Pat Canadian and a Prince Albert Raider prospect. And I asked Rory about his interview with Adam Harold.
If I'm not mistaken, this was at the TELUS Cup West Regionals, which was one of the first times I ever had the chance to, travel outside of the city I was living in and broadcast a weekend set of games sort of thing. And he was playing for the Regina Pack Canadians. And you could tell the talent level already. But the thing that stood out to me the most, I think he was 14 at the time. He might have been 15. But he was just way above his age. Maturity, the smile, it was a great interview for such a young kid. And, it was probably one of his first, and it was definitely one of my first interview that I gave too, but he just made it easy. he was just so well spoken and as I said, above his age for that time on the ice and off.
And something that we went on to talk about was the Adam Harold Legacy Foundation that is aimed at young athletes and producing leadership so Roddy, is there anything that strikes you from that?
Well, yeah, and there's kind of a theme through these interviews of the victims of the crash, and that's integrity. And when I say that I think of the Humboldt Broncos every day, it's because of Adam Harold's name and number is up on the rafters of the Cooperators Arena where the Packers play. I'm in there regularly. The Adam Harold Foundation, I just talked to Adam's dad, Russ, a couple weeks ago about that, how we were able to tie Mike Babcock into that because Mike and the Harold family had a very close association. And in the TV commercial that runs during our Pats broadcast, there's a clip of Adam talking about having integrity as a person and conducting yourself with respect for others. And I mean, the world lost a great one in Adam Harold, obviously, and his family's still having a real tough time with it. All you got to do is follow his dad's Twitter account. It has not been easy for them for a variety of reasons. And one, Adam was going to the National Hockey League. I don't think there's any doubt about it. At 16 years of age, he was an absolute horse, Jonathan. A horse. He was a power forward. And there's not a lot of those anymore in the mold of what Adam Harold was. So I'm glad that you brought that up with Rory, and Rory addressed it very well. But it's kind of just making me think that April 6th isn't going to get any easier anytime soon every time that it rolls around in this province. We lost some great people.
And our final clip here, it was just some general thoughts from Rory about what the Broncos mean to that community.
But every time you come into the building that the Humboldt Broncos are it can't be measured what it means to some here in the community, the kids, the community work that all the players do, the coaching staff, like everyone right across the board just knows what the Broncos mean to this organization. So for me to be able to step into the booth and, bring this hockey and this, organization to the people, across whoever wants to listen to it, if it's online, right? It means so much to me to be able to do that because I see the passion and the energy that everyone from the top to the bottom puts in, and then it's reciprocated by the support we receive from sponsors, from fans, from everyone across, not only Humboldt and Saskatchewan, but the world. So yeah, it's once again, it's just a great honor. I couldn't be happier.
Some great stuff there from Rory McGoran, the play-by-play voice of the Humboldt Broncos, and we thank him again for joining me before the show to talk for about 20 minutes and got some quotes and learned a lot from him. So thanks again to him for that. And Roddy, just a couple of more points that I think we should probably give mention before we sign off for the night. April 7th, the day after the April 6th mark, is now Green Shirt Day, and that stems from Logan Boulay, one of the young men who lost their lives in the crash. His donated organs benefited 6 people, and Green Shirt Day has been established to promote organ donation. So there's, like you said, there are no silver linings, and we don't want to frame it like that. But there's a great contribution that he's left. And of course, earlier we talked about Caleb Dahlgren. He's recently released his book, Crossroads, talking about his life and his experiences. And Caleb actually was one of those people that I initially talked to online and just kind of shared my heart with him and said, look, I got this idea, but, if you don't think that there's another voice from BC should be talking about it, I don't need to do it, but I think I have the right people around me to make it worthwhile. And he was behind it right away, said, yes, do it. We'd be honored. So want to acknowledge his book, Crossroads and thank him for his support as well. And a couple more names. Ryan Strzelnicki, you brought up for a moment earlier, is now on actually Team Alberta's sledge hockey team, with the goal of Olympic gold with Canada in sledge hockey. And the broadcast booth that Rory McGoran calls games in is, of course, now the Tyler Bieber broadcast booth, named after Tyler Bieber, who was the broadcaster on that 17-18 Broncos team. So, Roddy, if you have anything else, I will give you the last word.
Well, I just want to say I'm honored that you'd asked me to be part of it, Jonathan. I really am. So thank you for that. In the case of Rory, if you know Rory, and obviously you do, it's not shocking he talked about everybody else but himself. But I want to acknowledge Rory, because it wasn't easy for him to go in there to be the next broadcaster after Tyler Bieber, who was a local kid and loved by the community. And Rory's just done an unbelievable job of it. And then the coaches, Nathan Oystrick that went in there, Scott Barney, Troy Smith. It was hard for all those people, but they wanted to be part of the rebuild and honor the victims of the crash, the survivors of the crash. And I appreciate what you're doing, Jonathan. There's nothing ever to be thought that you're adding too many voices or that you shouldn't be honoring them. You're doing it for all the right reasons. And anybody that knows you knows that's why you're doing it. So it's going to be a solemn day, and most are when the Humboldt Broncos come up. But, Dave Dawson said it real well. These folks don't want their loved ones to be forgotten either, right? This is a wonderful way to remember them. I hope that we do it every April 6th, and in a piece of our hearts, we'll do it every day. But it's a big day, the anniversary of the worst day in Saskatchewan history, maybe hockey history.
Absolutely. We'll leave it there. But Rod, thanks so much for being part of this. Would not have done it without you. You know how much I appreciate you. That never changes. So thanks for being part of this.
Same goes from here, buddy. Keep in touch.
That sounds good. We'll let you go, but we will take one more break, and we'll be back with my wrap-up solo here and get you set for next week here on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions. And one more time, welcome back to Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions and on our Facebook page as well. Thanks so much for spending an hour of your Friday night with us. Was a much needed and very good hour with Rod Pedersen and Dave Dawson in our first two blocks. And in our third segment, hearing from Rory McGoran from earlier today, the play-by-play voice of the Humboldt Broncos. And I think we accomplished the simple goal that we set out to do, which was to honor and respect all those who were affected and, of course, those who lost their lives in the 2018 Humboldt Broncos bus crash, and just to make for sure that we're not going to forget them when this April 6th rolls around yet again. And again, I want to thank Caleb Dahlgren, who I spoke to momentarily before this. check out his book Crossroads. And of course, April 7th is Green Shirt Day for supportive organ donation, inspired by Logan Boulet. So we want to make sure everybody's ready for those. But thanks so much for spending an hour with us. To my guest, Rod Pedersen of the Rod Pedersen Show and Regina Pat's broadcasts in the WHL East Division Hub. He's calling Pat's games with there in DuPont. That's where you can find him right now. Dave Dawson, and of course, Rory. So thanks so much. You can find us online, astvproductions.com. That's where all of our show archives live, from behind the mic, as well as all of the rest of our shows across the ASTV network. You can find our shows live on the website and on Facebook. And if you would like, you can follow us on Twitter as well. So thanks so much for spending your Friday night, part of your Friday night with us. And we will be back back next week, same time, same place. Friday night, 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern, and we're really excited about next week's show. We have a roundtable show for the first time with a few baseball voices, as the Major League season will be a solid week underway. So we look forward to talking a little baseball next week with our special guests, who we will announce on the ASTV social pages early next week. So one more time, I'm Jonathan Hodgson for astvproductions.com. For my guests, Rod Pedersen, Dave Dawson, and Rory McGoran, thanks for watching, and we will talk to you next week.